Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? Yes, I was right. They slapped another 12-hour day on me. I worked 57 hours last week. I hate everything. But I did finish listening to another audiobook. This one, I heard about this when it was translated into English and published probably back in 2013. I remember hearing about this mainly because the title was unusual and the subject matter sounded intriguing. And then I completely forgot about it until a couple of months ago when somebody mentioned it in the comments on another video, which I've already forgotten. Roadside Picnic, excuse me, you tell I'm exhausted and dehydrated, is by the Strigozzi brothers, Arkady and Boris. And it's set in a post-alien visitation world, but it's not quite what you might think. The book is really an anthology of stories of people who have interacted with visitor zones where aliens showed up, messed around for a minute, and then left, and that was over a decade ago in world. This is a book where some external knowledge can help you to, understand the approach that the authors were taking. And it helps to know that the Soviet Union was still up and running, and these two authors were Soviets when the book was published. That's relevant because it had to pass censorship boards in order to gain publication in the Soviet Union. And there's an afterword at the end of the book where the authors explain just what they were up against. We in the West can tend to have a view of communism, even though the Soviets called themselves socialists. It's all the same animal, where it's not only morally reprehensible in the financial side, but morally reprehensible everywhere. But no, the screening standards for culture were also pretty high and subject to an auditing board. And things as innocuous as depicting spitting in a book were considered uncouth and could be subject to that screening. There were other things that were, obviously a little bit more aggressive. They would get you a PG-13 in American artwork. There was some profanity, some violence, some vulgarity, and things like that. But this book was heavily opposed by the Soviet machine inside the Soviet Union. After having read it, my personal verdict is I don't get what the big deal is. This is a book that has like a compelling concept that I think could be explored well, just maybe in the hands of a different writer, dare I even say it, a better writer. But I'm also willing to accept some of the handicaps that this book is deserves consideration for, namely that it was written A in the USSR, B in the 70s, and C in another language. I've noticed this effect more and more with books that I read that are translated into English from languages that I don't speak. When I'm reading books translated from Spanish, it's a little bit different. Whatever subtle undercurrents and qualities there are, because I'm familiar with those same qualities and I speak Spanish, it doesn't bug me to read a book that was translated into English. But I've had this problem with the Witcher novels by Andrzej Sapkowski, and now this one, Roadside Picnic by the Strugatsky's, and there's probably one or two other examples that aren't coming to mind. But there are peculiarities of a language that don't always translate through, even if the translator has done an exemplary and commendable job of trying to get the meaning across, the significance. Now that I've talked about this for 5 minutes or whatever, what's the premise of this book other than it being an anthology? Well, no, like I said, 13 years ago or so, there were aliens that came and visited Earth, and their contact with Earth basically trashed the place, made it radioactive. In some cases, there were zombies left behind in their wake. That was something else that the Soviet censors had an issue with. There was some technology that they left behind. Um, it was catastrophic and devastating in the areas where they landed, which obviously happened to be in Russia. And the significance of all of this kind of centers on a conversation that two characters have, probably 2/3 of the way through the book, where one of them explains it as, what is the roadside picnic? Why is it called this? He goes, well, think of a family taking a road trip, and they stop next to a lake or something for a couple of hours. They have lunch. They tromp around in the grass. They leave some trash lying around. They more or less destroy the place, and then they get back in their car and they leave and never give it a second thought. What would that look like from the perspective of all of the little critters and bugs and everything that live in that environment that are all of a sudden catastrophically affected by this brief and large-scale interaction with another species far beyond their comprehension? And that gives you something to bite into, to sink your teeth into. From there, the value of the individual stories in this anthology will just depend on whether you can get invested in the characters and their struggles. There are some guys that work really hard and sacrifice a lot and risk a lot to go into these visitor zones and try to scavenge what discarded technology they can without being affected by the radiation or other psychotic storm activity stuff is going on. There's also a bit of industrialization happening where companies are starting to build robots that can go into the visitor zones and scavenge without the risk of the kind of stuff that would happen to a human being. And it's sci-fi in the form of, here's an idea, let's explore that idea. I think in the end, the explorations don't amount to much. And maybe that's why I found this to be an underwhelming read. It was conceptually stimulating, but the execution kind of left me underwhelmed. Maybe it'll stand up to another reading later on. In the end, I'm glad that I read it. I put it behind me. I'm obviously more familiar with this work now than I was before I read it. It was fine. And maybe it will give me an idea for something that I could write later on that would, that I think might do a little bit more justice to that idea. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Roadside Picnic. If you've read it and if I'm missing something, by all means, let me know in the comments below. Check the description, find the link to my Amazon page, and go buy one of my novels. I recommend Howling Wilderness, my most recent release. It is fully illustrated in addition to being written and edited and pumped full of excitement by ya boy. Till next time, drive safe. See you out there.